today Major General H.D. Polumbo is a combat-tested F-16 pilot. He also, and this is a rarity, is a combat-tested U-2 pilot. I have never met a fighter pilot who's also a U-2 pilot, so this is a real privilege to welcome a combat-tested pilot here today. And he also, by the way, is a commander of the 9th Air Force at Shaw Air Force Base. And as such, he commands 8 active duty wings with about 400 aircraft and some 29,000 civilian and military personnel. Sir, you honor us with your presence. Stage is yours.
Good afternoon, Colonel Van Loan, Jack. Thank you for that short introduction. I will offer to you all that this table right in front of me, Miss Mays, congratulations on your husband's award, and especially for 60 years of marriage. I really applaud that. In any people that I meet, to be able to stay married for 60 years is a real accomplishment in life. But this table has one important member seated right there, and that is the clock. That I think that the past presidents have had some long-winded speakers over the course of the years, I'm sure. So I will keep my my time down to what's prescribed. I do say thank you to John and for your volunteer status as the president and the leader of this great organization, Rotary Club of Columbia. I am a Rotarian, and I have been off and on a member in good standing through the years. I just am not a very reliable Rotarian because I've lived in so many places in the last 10 to 15 years that I think the last club that I spoke to was in Stuttgart, and it was part of Rotary International in Germany there. And they asked me, hey, General, will you come to the meetings on a regular basis? And I said, no, I'm sorry. I travel around Africa and Europe a lot, and I just won't be very reliable. But this is a distinguished organization. Rotary is all about leadership. It's all about service. It's all about other people and helping men and women who need your and my help. And I sure was pleased when I was invited, Jack, to come up and talk to you for a few minutes. In my travel party is a very distinguished group of airmen at the table seated to your left, but the Command Chief of 9th Air Force, Command Chief Master Sergeant Scott Fuller, is just a distinguished airman of many, many years. And so I might even ask him, I might cede a couple of minutes to him at the end of my talk to see if the Command Chief has a few thoughts for you, because he has a lot of words of wisdom. So Scott, I'll come to you in a minute. Major Mark Scalco is my commander's action group, and he does all the hard work to get me places, including find this place, which I had not been here before. Mark, and then Master Sergeant Cole is in the background from my public affairs, and Master Sergeant is a senior NCO in our great Air Force. She does terrific work. Listen, I have about 2 hours worth of things I want to talk to you today in about 25 minutes, and I thought I would leave a few minutes for questions. And I really intend to do that for you because there may be a couple of things that either you might want me to cover from the podium, from the stage, or you might want me to come back and get back to you on, and I'd be glad to do that. There's a number of things that are going on with the United States military right now, broadly in the country. There's a number of things with your military men and women in the United States Army, United States Air Force, specifically in the Columbia area, that you should be interested in. Many of them are very complex. Many of them are very, very difficult and challenging for us as military leaders to deal with. So any of those type topics, I would be glad to have a discussion with you afterwards, or get back to you with some facts that I know might fuel the discussion and make it more informed, which is what you in this club and you and the men and women and the informed citizens of South Carolina need, I think, in the weeks and months to come. Today, though, I'd like to walk you through some important things, one of which is the game the other day. Okay, and somebody said something about the game the other day. Well, the United States Air Force Academy is 9-3. We haven't been 9-3 in a long time. Ask Major Scalco, who played intercollegiate baseball for the Air Force Academy. We haven't been 9-3 in a while. We beat Colorado State the other day, so that was the game that I was watching and following. I did hear about the results of the other game. I won't go into that. I will tell you very quickly the update for 9th Air Force. And again, as the commander of 9th Air Force, it was already stated that Jack mentioned it, who also has been an illustrious senior member of 9th Air Force staff, that is primarily a fighter command that swings from Langley Air Force Base in Virginia, where the F-22s, or one of the F-22 wings are located, all the way down to the 325th Fighter Wing down in Panama City, where the other F-22 wing is located in 9th Air Force, which makes up over half of the F-22s in the United States Air Force live in 9th Air Force. And so in between those two bookends are over half of the Strike Eagles F-15Es in the United States Air Force, and about 50% of the active duty A-10s in the whole Air Force are at Moody Air Force Base in the 74th and 75th Fighter Squadron. And then for the F-16s that you all have here in the state of South Carolina, in Shaw Air Force Base is the largest F-16 operational base in the world, with the over 80 F-16s we have there. And so when you take those aircraft and then you fold them into the Joint Terminal Attack Controllers and the men and women of the Tactical Air Control Party that work with side by side, hand in hand with our United States Army men and women on the ground around the world in the air-to-ground operation wing, and then fold in the joint strategic targeting system that we have in the JSTARS E-8C aircraft down in Warner Robins, where Chief and I were last week. And then the last component, which I think you'll find very interesting, is the largest consolidation of our rescue capabilities in the whole Air Force falls under my command in 9th Air Force, from the HH-60R rescue helicopters all the way to our Guardian Angels that fly on them, and then the HC-130s that refuel our rescue capabilities around the world in both the Special Ops Command and also in the traditional Air Force. 9th Air Force is just an absolute superb command for myself and the command chief to be members of and to be airmen in, and we're just as excited as we can every day about getting up and going to work every day and leading airmen on those type missions that you all know to be pretty exciting. And again, there's some stories embedded in those airplanes. There's some issues that are very challenging to us in 9th Air Force as to how the Air Force handles the challenges that come out of Washington, D.C. But I will tell you that currently we have nearly 2,000 of our 28,000 airmen deployed around the world, and we do a very, very high tempo operation every day, including the men and women that are out of Shaw Air Force Base that are deployed forward in the fight against ISIS and ISIL in a very significant way. And I'll come back to that in a minute if you'll let me, and John, I'll cover a little bit of that if we can with just how that works out every day. I will tell you that the challenging part of my job as the commander of the numbered Air Force, 9th Air Force, is that our budget predictability is very unpredictable because of a number of ways that our Defense Department has had to handle budget perturbations and budget ebbs and flows over the last probably 10 years of very difficult times of trying to work out next year's budget and trying to work out the first 3 or 4 months in a fiscal year without a budget. It becomes extremely difficult for my commanders at those bases that I just described to actually get their training done, to actually re-equip themselves with the new capabilities that come out that we get, and to retool themselves before they go back down range to fight these wars that you all are very familiar with. So that has been the budget battle, if you will, of the last 10 years, but recently with the sequestration and the sequestered budget, it's become exponentially more difficult. Because what your military right now is being forced to do is to try and figure out how to do more with less. How to do more mission that is assigned to us as military commanders with less people and likely with less money. And those two resources are everything in the game. I really, you can talk about the airplanes, but what Chief Fuller and I talk about every day and every night are the people who are trying to do the mission that you see on TV every day. It really should never leave your mind as you think about what your military is doing, whether it's out of ARCENT or 3rd Army that's also stationed with me at Shaw Air Force Base, whether it's those soldiers trying to do the mission that they've been assigned or your airmen trying to do the mission that we're assigned. It is a lot of mission that we are assigned, and our people keep getting less and less, and our resources in the budget lines keep getting smaller. And so it's a very challenging time for your commanders. And I offer that to you not as a point of sympathy or anything like that. It's nothing like that. It's simply a matter of trying to make the mission happen with the resources that were allocated, because none of us have this word called can't in our vocabulary. We can't figure out how to say can't. We figure out a way to get the mission done. But what has to happen, I think, is a national dialogue over the next year or two is just how engaged is your U.S. military around the world. What is our national strategy? What is our national security and national military strategy around the world with a Air Force that has shrunk, is in the process of getting to be about 50% of the size it was when I came in 30 plus years ago. When I graduated from the Air Force Academy and came into an Air Force that was nearly 600,000 airmen strong. And today we're working our way down to 315, 320,000 airmen in your Air Force today, and doing something that is much more capable. We are much more potent, much more capable as an Air Force. We are the best Air Force in the world, but it is getting to be the smallest Air Force that I've ever been had experience in as I continue in my command opportunity here in 9th Air Force. So I think for you to take away a message is that unpredictability of the budgeting of our military, and I'll use the military because my neighbor is the commander of 3rd Army, James Terry, Lieutenant General of the United States Army. And my neighbor and I, James Terry, we talk about this in the same vein in the United States Army as we do in the United States Air Force. It's a similar problem for the Navy. It's a similar problem for the Marine Corps. Your military has a lot of mission assigned to it from Washington, but the resources keep getting smaller. And you keep asking us to be more innovative, but at some point in time, you have to realize it costs bucks to be Buck Rogers. It costs money to be the best Air Force in the world. If that's what we continue to want as American citizens, you've got to have that dialogue with your congressional leaders, with your national leaders to say we want a strong military, because we should want that. We should want that. There's a number of airplanes that I mentioned to you that are in some ways the future of our Air Force. The F-22, a 5th generation fighter that from my perspective is the absolute finest weapon that an Air Force could ever own, is a aircraft that the enemy can't find. Let me say it again. The F-22 is an aircraft that the enemy can't find. So when we are opposed against an enemy of the United States, and the F-22 is here, and the enemy is here, but the enemy can't find this airplane, what do you think happens next? It's not a fair fight. But that's where I want to send my men and women who are in 9th Air Force into that fight. That's the fight that I'm willing to go to and fight, because we'll win it. If you want your Air Force to fight, don't you want it to be an unfair fight? And we have over half of the F-22s in the Air Force are in 9th Air Force at those two bases at Langley down at Tyndall in Panama City, Florida. And we very much want those aircraft to stay fully capable, fully mission capable. The missiles that are on them, all of the radars are updated, the software is updated. So these issues are what it takes, these budget issues are what it takes to stay the best in the world. And then you have some of the older airplanes in the United States Air Force, in 9th Air Force, and they're the A-10s. And they're the best at what they do. They really are very, very good at providing air support to our Marines, our airmen, our soldiers, our civilians on the ground who are under attack. The problem is the United States Air Force budget is only that big, and it would cost that much to keep all these airplanes in it. So if you don't keep buying the new ones, you can keep the old ones. If you keep buying the new ones, you've got to get rid of some of the old ones. It's the simplest equation, and all of you men and women are very experienced in business and budgets and how to strategically plan. Our Chief of Staff has strategically planned his Air Force out, our Air Force out, along with the Secretary of the Air Force, and they make tough decisions. You can't operate in a deficit as a company and survive long. You can't operate in a deficit in the United States Air Force and survive long. So we made a decision corporately to divest the A-10, but we're not able right now to do that because there are some that say the A-10 shouldn't go away. But how do you pay for all of it? And that's where the dilemma is for our Chief of Staff and for our Secretary, is how do you pay for all of it in that down market that I led off with. It is a difficult market that we operate in Washington with respect to defense budgets and service budgets. So in a very responsible way, our Chief of Staff made a decision to divest the A-10, even though we don't want to do that, but it's the best of the worst options. It's the best bad option, okay? And it's hard for me to stand at the podium and say that to you. It may look like I don't know what I'm talking about, but I clearly do. It's what we have to do to keep our Air Force the best in the world. Those older airplanes at some point in time have to go away so we can keep investing in the new airplanes that our enemy can't find. Because if the enemy can't find our new airplanes, the enemy loses and the United States wins. And you have to think about it that way when you're talking about fighting wars. And we are in the middle of a war. We're in the middle of a tough war again, especially from an airman's perspective in the war over in Iraq and Syria. Operation Inherent Resolve is a named operation. The United States is involved in a named operation called Operation Inherent Resolve. Our soldiers, our Marines, and our airmen, United States airmen, are uniquely fighting this war. It is an extremely challenging war. I was commenting that I have 0 time on the ground in Iraq. I've never stepped foot in Iraq. I have hundreds, or not hundreds, but I have nearly 100 hours of combat time over Iraq, over all cities and all borders of Iraq. So it's been in our persona for a while to be fighting in Iraq and airmen over Iraq. But now as we cross that border into Syria, we look at a very, very troublesome threat in ISIS, in the Islamic State. And airmen right now are holding the line against the Islamic State. And it's important because the U.S. Air Force, the U.S. Air Force is doing over 50% of the airstrikes, well over 50% of the airstrikes, and well over 70% of all the air missions flown in Iraq and Syria are United States Air Force. So your Air Force out of South Carolina is very engaged in that fight, and it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of equipment, it takes a lot of training, it takes a lot of fuel, it takes a lot of resources to put those number of sorties. And again, of the more than 3,800 sorties in Iraq and Syria, air sorties in those areas in the last few months, over 70% of them have been done by the United States Air Force. It's not easy to see that on the news. Sometimes you see a lot of airplanes taken off from aircraft carriers, which I salute the United States Navy. They are terrific. I've flown off the Eisenhower. Jack, I meant to tell you that. I've flown off the Eisenhower and F-18s in the Gulf of Oman. But 70% of the sorties are being flown by your U.S. Air Force. And it takes a great deal of effort to get those men and women over there, to get the equipment there, and to keep the airplanes flying. We have a broad coalition going on there right now. I had the air attaché from Washington in my office this morning from the Netherlands, and the Netherlands are flying in Operation Inherent Resolve, and they're side by side with us. There's a strong partnership with Belgium, Canada, Denmark, France, Netherlands, United Kingdom. We also have Jordan, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain flying with us in this operation. It's a very unique operation going on right now in Iraq and in Syria. And I would offer to you that your Air Force, your U.S. Air Force, is shouldering a very, very large part of the burden as we work our way through that. It is the men and women of 9th Air Force that I admire the most. You can say the airplanes are cool, but the airmen are better. The airmen are terrific. They are what makes Chief Fuller and me want to get up every morning early and go to the gym. He goes to the gym at about 5 o'clock. And when he's coming out at 6 o'clock, when the chief is coming out of the gym all pumped up at 6 o'clock, I'm going in there, so he gets up about an hour earlier than I do. But we love to go to work because of the great airmen that are out there. I want to see if Chief Fuller has any quick words just to say hello, but I always introduce my battle buddy whenever I'm at a forum like this. Chief.
Now, just so everybody knows, the general's got a speechwriter. On the drive over here with the major, he says, "Hey, Chief, you want to say a few words?" So this is impromptu. But I see that clock and I see the table of past presidents here, and I'll just say, General, we need one of those clocks in our staff meeting. And then I saw this cool bell up here, and it's kind of like a kid in a patrol car. You want to turn the lights on, and you just want to take this gavel and, like, ring the bell. But I won't. The General said a lot of new things about Air Force, and it's true. We've got a great Air Force. We've got a great Air Force, and a lot of amazing airmen. We were talking, the Major and I, over lunch, about what we trust these 18, 19-year-old, 20-year-olds, boom operators or pilots with multi-million-dollar platforms to go out and wage war violently downrange, and they do it flawlessly. And you should know that as people deploying and go take care of business, either here garrison or downrange, they're doing great things. They're doing it selflessly, and like the General said, we're not doing it for pats on the back. We're doing it because we love what we do. As we get smaller, we're getting much smaller, and over the past nearly 30 years for me, I've seen lots of change, and good change. And as we evolve into a more efficient and a more performance-based Air Force, you should know that your airmen are out there, they're working hard, they're doing things inside the fence line, and then when they're off, they get rid of their uniform and they go out into your communities and volunteer in every facet you can imagine. And so we encourage that, because we want to raise up strong civilians, strong civic leaders, strong airmen in our communities. But you should just know that we expect a lot of our airmen. We hold them high when they're doing the right things, and when they do the wrong things, we hold them accountable. And you should know that as well. But it's okay. You know, in the Air Force, we have this thing called structure and discipline, and it's pretty cool. And as I transition into the civilian sector next year, as I retire, I'm looking forward to that structure and discipline in the civic area as well, right? I've heard the stories. I'm kidding. But seriously, we're creating a new evaluation form, and we've been doing this for years and years. We do a kind of a report card on each of our subordinates, and we rate them on how well they performed over the last rating period. And for the past many years, you know, we didn't really get it right. We don't put a lot of time and effort in there, and a lot of integrity and transparency into those evaluations. But we're creating a new one. Chief Master of the Air Force and a small group of people are changing this evaluation for a more performance-based evaluation, and to encourage people to go out and really focus on their functional communities, their functional areas, to continue going to school, to be involved in the communities for the self-improvement opportunities. And as they do that, as supervisors, we're going to rate them fairly. And so that's to make them better and stronger, better airmen, better leaders. And when they leave the Air Force someday, and they will, we all do, then we'll come into a civic community like this here, and we'll get embedded into whatever that might be. But you should know that the Air Force is in great hands. We've got some great airmen doing some amazing things. And if you ever get a chance to get out to Shaw Air Force Base or any of the bases within the 9th Air Force, we'd be glad to show you around. We'd be glad to show you some of our capabilities, and I think you'll be amazed. So I think that we have a few minutes left that we probably want to leave for some question and answer for the general.
The command chief doesn't need any speech writers. Yes, sir, in the back, please.
General, we appreciate you being in there, no question about it. I'm from Sumter, so I'm very familiar with Shaw Air Force Base. One thing I'd like to ask you is your training facility in Manchester State Marshal practice facility still open to the public?
The training facility for...
No, not the training facility, the practice range.
You know, if you're talking about the skeet range and the firing range...
Oh, no, Lord, y'all, I'm talking about the one where you go in and drop bombs or these powder bombs.
Poinsett.
Poinsett State Park.
I think...
Not familiar with that one?
Oh, I've shot a lot of guns on it. But I'm not sure whether we open it up to people to go in there to shoot and take target practice or...
Well, I'm talking about in Manchester State Park, and that's the Air Force uses that, I would imagine. The warthogs go in there and practice.
They do. They can, and so it's still a viable range. Poinsett is, sir, I think the range you're talking about. And
right.
Again, it's still alive and well. We will go there regularly, but not as often as we used to. Between us and McIntyre, the F-16s out of McIntyre, they will go there regularly. But I will tell you that what the F-16 mission is at McIntyre and at Shaw has almost outgrown that range. And why do I say that? Because what the F-16s out of Shaw do is two very unique missions that not many other airplanes in the world can do. One is to suppress enemy air defenses with long-range 40, 50-mile missiles that can go in and suppress a SAM site. And sometimes when we really want to get close to those missile sites, we will get in there with joint direct attack munitions, GPS-guided munitions, and we'll drop those from about 10 miles away, sometimes 10 or 11. And so we've almost outgrown Poinsett until we actually get it to be a bigger boundary. But we still go in there and shoot the 20-millimeter gun regularly. The A-10s will come up occasionally, although they have a good range right down there in Valdosta.
Is it open to the public still?
I would highly encourage you to check the notice. You say that it is. I think that you can go on the periphery of it, Mike, and there are some areas where I think you can go. But it is a live fire range. Yes, sir. And I've loved taking people to the range and watching aircraft deliver munitions. I think that's what you're mentioning is can we show the public these firepower demos? We used to do it regularly. Now it's a little more difficult because of the rules that have come down because of sequestration and government shutdowns and everything else. We should always show you the public what we can do. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. How do drones factor into, do you ever anticipate coordinating with drones in missions where manned aircraft and drones are kind of in the same?
We do, and I have, and I'll explain it to you in a very short, brief way, but tell you that we're the best in the world at it. The drones that I flew, Jack, at Beale Air Force Base when I wasn't flying U-2s were Global Hawks, RQ-4s, and they had about a 27-hour duration of flight. They could work about 15,000-mile legs, unmanned, unrefueled. Those drones we didn't work with as much, but the Predators and the Reapers I worked with in Afghanistan all the time. So last year, before getting to Shaw Air Force Base, I was a commander in Afghanistan, and I would fly regularly, and we would be in the stack of about 6, 7, 8 airplanes of stack. Sometimes the A-10s on the bottom, sometimes the fast B-1s on the top. And in the middle were the drones. Exactly where they were supposed to be, exactly on time, on target, could deliver ordnance in the most incredible way, being flown by airmen back at Creech Air Force Base in Nevada, or in Alvin Air Force Base in New Mexico. And they were as precise of airmen as you could imagine, flying in the stack right underneath me. Occasionally, I'd be orbiting in a left-hand turn, the drone would be orbiting in a right-hand turn, and we would meet like this, 1,000 feet apart. And I would kind of close my eyes at first. Then I'd go, I sure am glad that drone knows how to hold altitude, because I'd be running into it. But we were always in the stack together. Unmanned aircraft right on top of
Do they
manned.
help with your budget?
They do a little bit, but the ones that we currently have don't operate as well in a contested environment. If there are SAMs, if there are fighters, enemy fighters, or any kind of AAA, they are the first to go down. They don't have any defensive capabilities, the ones we currently fly. So to get them into a very contested, high-threat, high-end fight, we wouldn't be able to keep them airborne long. We need more advanced systems like the F-16 and the F-15, F-22. Yes, ma'am.
Can you tell us how a plane can be invisible? Is that top secret?
It's not top secret. It used to be the United States, when they were building these airplanes, ma'am, back in the 90s and the early 2000s. Actually, it was in the early 90s. It was a top secret capability that allowed the airplane and the coatings on the airplane and the angles on the airplane and the intakes to the engines. All of that technology was top secret 20 years ago. Today, it's in James. It's in the publications. You can look and see how we do it. But currently, only the United States can do it. The Chinese are trying to duplicate it, replicate it. The Iranians are trying to duplicate it. The North Koreans probably are nowhere near being able to do it. But it takes manufacturing, it takes unique capabilities that only the industrial base of the United States can actually form and mold and meld and put together and then turn into a supersonic fighter that the enemy cannot see. But the techniques are all well understood now. It's been around for 20 years now. And so those techniques are understood. You just have to have the American way to put it together. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
If you were not on the ground in Iraq, where were your bases that you flew from over Iraq?
We always say there are a number of our allies in the Arabian Gulf, what used to be called the Persian Gulf, but the Arabian Gulf, the North Arabian Gulf. We always will tell you I was in a base near the Arabian Gulf. And it's important because our allies are very sensitive to where combat operations are flown out of their countries. And so any of the bases where I've flown combat operations out of in that region, primarily their countries do not like us to admit that the United States Air Force flies out of those bases. That's why you see the United States Navy on TV a lot, because they bring the runway where they go. They have no problem flying out of either the Gulf of Oman or the North Arabian Gulf, and they can sortie into Iraq and publicize. We in the United States Air Force are a little more encumbered by our host nation. But you can look on the map and you can see kind of where it is. You can kind of do one of those, you know, what's the radius of an F-16 or what's the radius of a U-2, and you can figure it out. Right in the North Arabian Gulf region, yes, sir. Okay, I think we have time for one more question.
That'd be great.
Do we?
Absolutely.
Do you want to pick or do you want to?
You'll like this. So here's the question. We know what you do for us, and we appreciate it very much, so thank you to all of you guys. And the question is, what can we do for you as the commander, as a business community, and as your neighbors in the area?
It's a perfect finishing question, and the answer is you can be my spokesman. You can talk frankly with your congressman and your senator. You can tell your leaders that you know have a voice or have a conduit into Washington, D.C. that to keep the best Air Force in the world, bar none, hands down, without a doubt, to keep that for the next 10, pick a number, to 50 years, you must invest in your Air Force. To keep the best Navy in the world, you must invest in your Navy. You cannot ask your Navy to be innovative with yesterday's weapons. You cannot ask your Air Force to be innovative with yesterday's airplanes. We got to have the best to be the best. You can say that more directly and bluntly than I can. I will say it to you, my fellow Rotarians, because I trust you. I will say to a newspaper editor bluntly, but I would ask that you don't quote me. At certain times when I say they aren't listening, or they won't listen, or they right now aren't going to get to the solution, because we need to get to the solution. And again, that dialogue in Washington, a tighter national military strategy, a more succinct national security strategy, a real dialogue on how engaged you want your military to be around the world. You all can say that. You're informed citizens. Because of the chief talking to you today, you're really informed. You're informed citizens. You can have that dialogue. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today. I really do. Thank you all for your time.
General Polumbo, in appreciation of your time. I have this from the club. And we thank you for your spot-on assessment of today's military, how we continue to accomplish the mission in the given circumstances. Appreciate you. President-elect Mark could not be here today, but next week's speaker is Dr. Dick Lincoln from Shannon Baptist, and he wanted to remind everyone that on January 5th, we will have Lance Corporal Cal Carpenter, local Marine who is awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor. So that'll be on January 5th. For the sake of time, we will forgo music, and I hope everyone has a great week.